Okay, guys, we're going to jump right into it. The collective bargaining agreement just was approved by the Players Association and the owners. First thought was awesome, there's going to be no stoppage in baseball. But then we started seeing some of the details come out, particularly when it comes to the international side of things, really kind of bothered me. So I'm going to jump right on into that. Let's see here. Yeah, John Heyman first reported that there's going to be no international draft this year, or moving forward for the next 5 years, which is how long the current collective bargaining agreement is scheduled to last. But as you can see here, the signings are said to be capped at 5 to 6 million per team per year. Now, on one hand, that does seem to make things fair for everybody. You're not going to have teams just being able to blow through their spending caps and allowed to spend, 10, 15 times as much as other teams are willing to spend. But at the same time, that brings up a really huge problem for me. 5 to 6 million per team means there's going to be 150 to 180 million dollars available to be spent, and not every team is going to spend 5 to 6 million dollars. Baseball America reported for the 2015 signing period, which is the last one that's been completed, the 2016 period is still open. Here we'll take a quick look. This is the 2015 signing period through March of 2016. Now, none of these numbers include any of the penalties paid. So you see here that the Dodgers spent $45 million. Well, they paid over $40 million in penalties to Major League Baseball on top of that money. Now, if we just look at just the spending without penalties for all the teams, you don't have to do the math, I've done it for you. It's just over $200 million. So before teams paid any penalties whatsoever, in the last full signing period, they spent more than they're allowed to spend now. Now, if you add in the penalties, that's another $100 million. So in total, teams were willing to spend $300 million in 2015 on international players. Well, they've cut that down by up to 50% if it's only going to be $5 million per team, and 40% if it's going to be $180 million per team, or not per team, but per year for all of the teams. That's a big chunk of change that amateur players are now not going to see, and for what? What did the Players Association get in return for that? Pretty much that the luxury tax threshold is going to change. That really doesn't do too much. The players gave up a ton of money to amateur players to get very little in return. I don't know. After all of the grandstanding that they made about how they don't want an international draft because of what it could possibly do to the players, you'd hear things like, what option does the player have if they get drafted? They can't just say no. There are no other options for that player. It's going to cost them money because it's either basically a take it or leave it situation. And that is correct. If you're in a draft and you don't have the option, wow, my voice just cracked. I'm 12. You don't have the option like American kids to either go back to college if you were drafted out of college, or to go to college if you were drafted out of high school. You don't have that leverage when you're coming out of the Dominican Republic or Venezuela, where a lot of these kids are dropping out of school when they're 12 and 13 years old to focus on playing baseball and trying to get that contract. It's not an option for them. So I understood where they were coming from when they said things like that, but then they turn around and they're just cutting the amount of money basically in half versus what teams are willing to spend. And of course the owners love this because they're basically stopping themselves from making mistakes. And that's what it's all about, is they want to get the most out of their money. And I can't say I blame them for it, but I also think that it's very unfair how they're going about doing this. Because they and their scouts and their development teams make mistakes on these high dollar players. And not all of them are high dollar players, but these are the ones that they're really going to affect. They're just trying to save money and pay less for these players. And it just really rubs me the wrong way. If you've followed any of my readings over the past few years, you really understand that I'm a very big proponent of paying amateur players and minor league players their worth. And clearly, teams think that they're worth a lot more, given what they spent in 2015, than what they're going to be paying for them moving forward. This is just a way to save money for the owners and to, basically tell the players, hey, you're going to take what we give you because there's nothing you can do about it. One other interesting point with all of this is, the cap of $5 to $6 million per team. I had said earlier that, this makes things fair for everybody. And, as you just saw, the Dodgers spent, with penalties, $90 million in 2015. That's a team like the Reds, they're never going to be able to do that. It's just out of the question with the finance situations they've got, being a smaller market team with a smaller TV deal. They're never going to be able to compete on that level. And I don't necessarily mind that they set up new rules. I think they took it way too far. But in 2016, the Reds signed 2 different players for more than they're going to be allowed to spend for all of their players over the next 5 years in a given year. Both Vladimir Gutierrez and Alfredo Rodriguez got more money each, especially if we count what the team paid in penalties for signing both of those guys and going over their limit, which wound up being $9 million for Gutierrez and somewhere around $10 or $11 million for Rodriguez. That's 4 times as much money between the two of them that the team's going to be able to spend in the next year or the next 4 years after that. Again, it's just a really weird situation. The international market is a place where the small market teams, generally speaking, could compete with the big market teams if they were willing to. A lot of them weren't willing to, but the San Diego Padres spent almost $60 million this past year, if we count their penalties paid because they went over their bonus limits. They're never going to be able to compete with the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Cubs for major league talent. Those involve $200 million plus investments in single players. But this was always a situation where teams could, if they chose to spend the money, compete with the big market teams for the most part. They're going to be able to now because everybody's kind of going to have this set limit. But I don't know. I just think it's very unfair the way that they're basically taking so much money out of the players' pockets. And, this is for players that have no bargaining ability whatsoever to the table. The guys at the bargaining table, they're all 30-plus-year-old players who took their ideas of what that they wanted to Tony Clark at the Major League Baseball Players Association and said, this is what we want. And, these 16-year-old kids, they're not... They really don't have a say in this, but their future earnings are absolutely being determined by people that really don't care about them. And I don't know. That just sits in a very strange place with me. Now, one of the other things that we don't know about yet is how this new collective bargaining agreement affects the penalties for going over your bonus in the past. As things sit right now, the Cincinnati Reds, because they signed Vladimir Gutierrez and Alfredo Rodriguez, they went over their bonus limits, and a part of the penalty was that they were unable to sign players in the next 2 seasons for over $350,000 on the international market. We don't know if those penalties are going to be wiped clean and they'll be able to participate moving forward, or if those are going to carry over. So we'll have to wait and see on that, and technically, we're going to have to wait and see on a lot of these things. We're just getting bits and pieces right now. If, let's say, the current situation with the $5 to $6 million per team holds strong, but say Cuban players are exempt, I think that would be a much more realistic and somewhat more fair deal. It's always been the Cuban players, for the most part, that have been signing the $5+ million a year, or not a year, signing bonus deals, anywhere between that $5 and $20 million range. I think if you set up the rules where you exclude them from this this bonus pool that's got a hard cap on it, I think that would make things quite a bit more fair, and the Latin American kids would be getting a larger chunk of the pie than the 50% that it appears that they'll be getting now. So hopefully that is something that we will see. But I guess we're going to have to wait and find out as more details come out. But as things sit right now, I really don't like the things that I've seen from the rules that we have gotten. Hopefully there'll be some things that we haven't seen yet that'll make things a little bit better for the players. But we will find out. And I guess I'm going to end my little rant right here. But thanks for listening. If you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, click the subscribe button. If you're watching this on the website that it's embedded in, you can head on over to YouTube and subscribe, and you'll get updates whenever we post a new video. Reds Fest is, let's see, what is today? Today's Wednesday. Reds Fest is in 2 days, so over the weekend I'll have plenty of videos, probably Sunday and Monday from Reds Fest, hopefully talking with some players. And so if you would like to get updated when that stuff goes live, be sure to subscribe. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you later.